Elizabeth Taylor had faced rejection before, divorced, abandoned, betrayed, but she had never been refused a kiss. Not a professional kiss, not a fleeting comedy sketch kiss, not a trivial television moment that would vanish in 3 seconds and be forgotten by next week. Yet Dean Martin had said no, and she couldn't understand why. They were in Dean's dressing room with the door closed. Elizabeth sat on the couch while Dean stood by the window trying to explain. "It's not you. It's me," he said. Elizabeth laughed bitterly. That was what everyone said. Dean turned to her, insisting, "I mean it, Elizabeth. You're Elizabeth Taylor. You're perfect." Shaking his head, he added, "No, you're not perfect, and that's what makes you remarkable." Elizabeth looked up, startled. Dean sat down across from her, careful to keep a respectful distance. "I've watched you for years, your movies, your interviews, your life, and I've seen something that most people miss." Elizabeth waited, unsure what he meant. Dean's voice was gentle, cutting through the tension. "You're terrified," he said. "Terrified of being alone, terrified of being unwanted, terrified that without your beauty, you're nothing. So you let people use you, let them reduce you to a face, a body, a kiss, because at least then you're wanted. At least then you matter." Elizabeth felt tears welling in her eyes as he continued. "But you're more than that. You're an actress, one of the greatest. You're intelligent, you're funny, you're kind. I've heard about your charity work, your loyalty to friends, the way you fight for the people you love. That's who you are. Not the scandals, not the marriages, not the beauty. But you've been told your whole life that your value comes from how you look, from who wants you. And you've started to believe it." Elizabeth's voice was barely a whisper. "Why won't you kiss me?" Dean leaned forward, earnest. "Because if I kiss you in that sketch, I'm telling you and everyone watching that your value is in being desired, in being the prize, in being the joke. And I won't do that to you. I won't reinforce what the world has been telling you your entire life." Dean's voice softened, steady and unflinching. "Elizabeth, you're 40 years old. You're worried about aging, about losing your looks, about becoming irrelevant. I can see it in your eyes, in the way you agreed to do this sketch, in the way you're trying to prove you're still desirable. But you don't need to prove anything, not to me, not to anyone." Elizabeth was crying now, fully, and Dean handed her a tissue. "You asked me to kiss you," he said gently, "and I said no, not because I don't want to, but because you deserve more than that. You deserve to be valued for who you are, not how you look. You deserve respect, not desire. And if saying no is the only way I can show you that, then that's what I'll do." Elizabeth looked at Dean Martin, the man she barely knew, the entertainer she had long dismissed as a drunk playboy. Yet here he was, seeing through every defense she had built over 40 years. She cried, not because she had been rejected, but because someone finally saw her, really saw her, and valued what he saw. Rehearsal was Tuesday afternoon. Elizabeth arrived on time, professional, as she always did. She had been doing this since she was 12, and she knew how television worked. Elizabeth knew her marks and her lines. Dean arrived a few minutes later, casual and relaxed, slipping effortlessly into his persona. They read through the sketch, making adjustments, fine-tuning timing, and the director nodded in approval. This was going to work. They reached the end, the kiss. Dean stopped. "I'd like to talk about this moment," he said. The director looked up, puzzled. "The kiss?" "Yeah," Dean said. "I'm not comfortable with it." The director laughed. "Dean, you've kissed 100 women on this show. What's different?" Dean glanced at Elizabeth. "She's different." Elizabeth felt something stir. Was that a compliment or an insult? Dean continued. "I think we should change the ending. Instead of a kiss, maybe I bow or kiss her hand, something respectful." The director frowned. "But the kiss is the payoff. That's what the audience expects." Dean turned his head. "I understand, but I'd like to do something else." The director turned to Elizabeth. "What do you think?" She didn't know what to think. In 30 years of being desired, pursued, and treated as the ultimate prize, no one had ever refused to kiss her. It was disorienting, confusing, and even a little insulting. "I'm fine with the kiss," she said, her voice edged with something sharp. "If Dean's not comfortable, we can change it, but I want to be clear, it's not because I'm asking him to." Dean met her gaze. "I understand. This is my choice." A flash of anger rose in Elizabeth. "Why won't he kiss me?" The room fell silent. Everyone knew who Elizabeth Taylor was. Her reputation, her beauty, her history. For Dean Martin to refuse a kiss felt like an affront to her legacy, to everything she embodied. Dean's voice softened. "Can we talk privately?" Elizabeth stood, arms crossed, defensive. "Fine, let's talk." They moved to Dean's dressing room. Elizabeth sat on the couch, tense, while Dean closed the door and stood by the window, trying to explain. "It's not you, it's me," he began. Elizabeth laughed bitterly. That was what everyone said. Dean turned to her, insisting, "I mean it, Elizabeth. You're Elizabeth Taylor. You're perfect." Shaking his head, he added, "No, you're not perfect, and that's what makes you remarkable." Elizabeth looked up, startled. Dean sat down across from her, careful to keep a respectful distance. "I've watched you for years, your movies, your interviews, your life, and I've seen something that most people miss." Elizabeth waited, unsure what he meant. Dean's voice was gentle, cutting through the tension. "You're terrified," he said. "Terrified of being alone, terrified of being unwanted, terrified that without your beauty, you're nothing. So you let people use you, let them reduce you to a face, a body, a kiss, because at least then you're wanted. At least then you matter." Elizabeth felt tears welling in her eyes as he continued. "But you're more than that. You're an actress, one of the greatest. You're intelligent, you're funny, you're kind. I've heard about your charity work, your loyalty to friends, the way you fight for the people you love. That's who you are. Not the scandals, not the marriages, not the beauty. But you've been told your whole life that your value comes from how you look, from who wants you, and you've started to believe it." Elizabeth's voice was barely a whisper. "Why won't you kiss me?" Dean leaned forward, earnest. "Because if I kiss you in that sketch, I'm telling you and everyone watching that your value is in being desired, in being the prize, in being the joke, and I won't do that to you. I won't reinforce what the world has been telling you you're—" The room was silent, except for Elizabeth's quiet sobs. Dean handed her a tissue box. "I've done a lot of things in my career I'm not proud of. I've played the drunk, the playboy, the guy who doesn't care, and it cost me. My marriages, my relationships with my kids, my self-respect." He paused again. "I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not pretending that women are prizes, that kisses are jokes, that people are objects. And I'm especially not doing it to you, because you deserve better. You deserve to be valued for who you are, not for what you look like." Elizabeth wiped her eyes, her makeup ruined, her voice shaking. I don't know what to say." Dean stood, steady, letting the weight of his words linger. "You don't have to say anything. We'll change the sketch, make it funny another way. The network will be fine, the audience will be fine, and you'll be fine. Because you're Elizabeth Taylor, and you're so much more than a kiss." They sat in silence for a few minutes. Elizabeth tried to compose herself while Dean gave her space. Finally, she spoke. "How did you know? How did you see all that?" Dean shrugged. "Because I felt it. Not the same way, but the same fear. The fear that without the persona, without the act, I'm nothing. That people only like the character, not the man. And it took losing everything to realize the character wasn't worth it." Elizabeth looked at him, this man she'd dismissed as a lightweight, a drunk comedian, someone not serious, and realized she had been wrong. Dean Martin was more than his persona, just like her. "Thank you," Elizabeth whispered. Dean smiled. "Thank you for trusting me, for letting me see you, really see you." Elizabeth stood, now composed. "Let's go back. Let's do the sketch, but your way, respectfully." Dean rose too. "Are you sure?" Elizabeth nodded. "I'm sure. For the first time in a long time, I'm sure." They returned to the set. The crew was tense, whispering, wondering what had happened. The director approached. "Are we okay?" Dean glanced at Elizabeth. She nodded. "We're okay," he said, "but we're changing the ending. Instead of a kiss, I'm going to take Elizabeth's hand, kiss it, like she's royalty. Because she is. he added softly. The director opened his mouth to protest, but Elizabeth cut him off. "We're changing it. That's final." Something in her voice left no room for argument. The director nodded. "Okay, we'll rehearse it." They ran through the sketch again, this time with the new ending. When Dean lifted Elizabeth's hand and pressed a gentle, respectful kiss to it, she felt tears forming again. But these were good tears, grateful tears, the kind that come when someone truly sees you and treats you like you matter. Thursday night arrived, show night. The sketch went perfectly. The comedy worked, the timing was sharp, and Elizabeth was brilliant, funny, charming, and real. And at the end, when Dean kissed her hand, the audience recognized something different. Not a joke, not a punchline, something genuine, respectful, something rare on a variety show. The studio audience applauded long and loud, not just because it was funny, but because it was beautiful. After the show, Elizabeth went to Dean's dressing room and knocked. "Come in," Dean called. She entered and closed the door behind her. "I wanted to thank you again, for what you did, for what you said." Dean stood. "You don't need to thank me." Elizabeth shook her head. "Yes, I do, because you're right about all of it. I've been terrified of aging, of becoming irrelevant, of losing the only thing I thought made me valuable. And I've been letting people treat me like I'm just a face, just a body, just a prize." She paused, gathering herself. "But you didn't. You treated me like I'm more than that, and I needed that more than you know." Dean walked over and took her hands. "Elizabeth, you are more than that. Don't ever forget it. Don't ever let anyone tell you differently. You're one of the greatest actresses alive. You're a fighter, a survivor, a force. That's your value. That's who you are." Elizabeth hugged him. "Thank you for seeing me." Dean hugged her back. "Thank you for letting me." They pulled apart, a quiet understanding passing between them. Elizabeth wiped her eyes. "I should go before I ruin my makeup again." Dean laughed. "Go be Elizabeth Taylor, the real one, not the one everyone expects." Elizabeth smiled. "I think I will." She left, and Dean stayed in his dressing room, quietly hoping he had helped, hoping she believed his words, hoping she knew she was more than just a beautiful face. Years later, in interviews, Elizabeth Taylor would speak about turning points in her life, moments that changed her. She mentioned Mike Todd's death, her marriage to Richard Burton, and one other moment, a conversation with Dean Martin. She never shared the details, never revealed exactly what had been said, yet she credited Dean with helping her understand her own value, with helping her see herself as more than her beauty, with giving her permission to age, to change, to be more than what everyone expected. In 1973, Elizabeth won her second Oscar for a role in which she played an older woman, unglamorous, raw, real. Critics hailed it as her best work, her most honest performance. When she accepted the award, Elizabeth dedicated it to Dean Martin, calling him a friend, a truth teller, someone who had seen her when she couldn't see herself. That night, Dean watched the Oscars, saw her win, heard her mention his name, and smiled, not because of the recognition, but because Elizabeth Taylor had stopped trying to be the most beautiful woman in the world. She had started being Elizabeth Taylor, the actress, the person, the complicated, fierce, remarkable human being she had always been. That night on the Dean Martin Show in March 1970 mattered, not for what happened on camera, but for what happened off camera, in a dressing room between two people who understood the weight of living behind a persona, of being reduced to an image, of fighting for dignity in an industry that prized appearance over substance. Dean Martin refused to kiss Elizabeth Taylor, not because she wasn't beautiful, but because she was so much more than beautiful. Someone needed to tell her that, to show her that respect mattered more than desire, dignity more than entertainment, and that she mattered more than the image. For the rest of her life, Elizabeth Taylor never forgot it. If this story moved you, subscribe and hit thumbs up.